Have you ever just looked around at, everything? The world, society, nature? It's incredibly complex, right? From tiny particles doing their thing up to, well, galaxies?
Oh, yeah. Or from a single cell pulsing to this huge, complicated web of human society.
Exactly. And don't you just get that feeling sometimes that human urge to find the pattern in it all, to see how it connects?
Definitely. It feels like we're hardwired for it, trying to find those underlying rules, the currents that seem to, well, flow through everything.
And that word flow, it just keeps popping up, doesn't
This
it?
really does, everywhere you look.
Yeah, it's obviously more than just like water in a river. We talk about information flowing, traffic flowing, conversation.
The flow of ideas, even, is this sense of movement, direction, dynamism. Seems pretty fundamental.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to follow this one really powerful idea of flow and trace how it builds up, creating complexity through different levels of reality.
And our main guide here is a really interesting framework from William L. Weaver, from his paper, The River of Reality.
Yeah, and what's cool is that this whole thing is deeply rooted in systems thinking, which isn't about looking at things in isolation, right?
Not at all. It's all about the connections, the interactions, how new things emerge when parts come together.
Hmm.
We're specifically hunting for those repeating patterns, those, what's the word?
Isomorphisms.
Isomorphisms, exactly.
Yeah.
The common shapes or rules that appear in totally different places.
So Weaver's got this framework, the standard systems model,
Oh, yeah.
and it basically maps reality as this hierarchy.
Right. It starts with the basic foundation, energy, material, and information, EM and I.
EMI, got it.
And from there, reality sort of builds up through tiers. Tier 1 is the physical stuff. Tier 2 is life, biological systems. And Tier 3 is us, basically sociocultural systems.
And the river of reality is the metaphor for how flow flows through these tiers.
Pretty much how the nature of flow itself changes and becomes more complex as you go up the levels.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive. We're tracing this river of reality, starting at the source, physical flows,
Then, seeing how life organizes those flows in Tier 2.
which then leads to this whole cascade of human social flows in Tier 3.
And then, the really big one, how it all culminates in the flow of consciousness. Weaver links that directly to philosophy.
Philosophy. Okay, interesting. So we want to make sense of that whole journey, that progression, and figure out what it tells us about, well, everything.
And the payoff for you, the listener, is that this isn't just some abstract theory. Really understanding these flows gives you a powerful new way to look at, well, any system.
Your workplace, your community, maybe even just, watching the news, you start seeing the underlying currents.
Exactly. From the simplest things to the really big, complex ones.
All right, let's wade in. Before we jump right into Weaver's River, we need to get our bearings with the landscape it flows through systems thinking. It's the foundation for this whole model.
Good idea. Let's just quickly recap the core concepts, maybe pulling from those other sources too, because it's not a theory exactly. It's more like a mindset.
Yeah, an approach, a way of understanding how things are interconnected. That's key, right? Interconnectedness.
Absolutely. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything affects everything else within a system. Like you said, think of a forest. It's not just trees.
It's the soil, the water, the bugs, the fungi, everything interacting. The real action is in the connections.
And when you look at those connections over time, you start seeing patterns.
Ah, right. Things repeat. Cycles, structures. Stuff you miss if you only look at the individual pieces.
Yeah, like seeing the rhythm in complex music. Those patterns hint at the underlying rules of the system.
And it's not just that things are connected, but how? The relationships.
Exactly. Are they helping each other? Competing? Is it direct cause and effect? Or does it loop back?
Feedback loops. That's huge in systems thinking.
Crucial. It's how systems regulate themselves, or sometimes spiral out of control. Think of a thermostat keeping the temperature steady. That's negative feedback.
Or compound interest making money grow faster and faster. Positive feedback.
Right. Systems are constantly adjusting based on feedback.
And then there's hierarchy. Systems within systems.
Nested systems, yeah. Like Russian dolls, organelles in a cell, cells in a tissue, tissues in an organ.
Organs in an organism. And each level up has new properties, right? Things you couldn't predict just by looking at the parts below. Emergence.
Emergence is key. And general systems theory, GST, was really about finding those common principles across these levels and even across different types of systems. That's the isomorphism idea again.
Finding the same rules for how a cell organizes itself and how, say, a company organizes itself.
Potentially, yeah. If you find those universal rules, you can learn a lot faster, build a more unified picture of how things work.
So systems thinking is basically taking all those GST ideas, interconnectedness, patterns, relationships, feedback, hierarchy, emergence, isomorphism, and actually using them. It's the practice.
It's the mindset, training yourself to ask, how does this connect? What's the bigger picture? Instead of just reacting to isolated events.
It's about understanding the system that a problem lives in, not just the problem itself.
Precisely. And Weaver's standard systems model is his attempt to package these ideas into a clear map of reality focused on flow and emergence.
Okay, got the systems thinking foundation. Now, Weaver's specific starting point, this foundational trinity, he calls it, energy, material, and information, EMI.
EMI. He argues that fundamentally, everything can be described using these three.
And he uses that color analogy, RGB.
Yeah, red, green, blue. Just like those primary colors mixed to create every other color, EM and I combine to form everything in reality.
So E is energy. That's red, the most basic one.
That's how he presents it. The capacity to do work, cause change. Physics stuff, forces, motion, heat, the raw potential.
Okay, then M, material. That's green, the actual stuff, matter, atoms.
Right. But the key insight here, coming from physics like EEMC Go, is that material isn't totally separate. It emerges from energy. It's like condensed energy, energy bound up in stable forms.
Okay, so E is deeper. M comes from E. Mostly chemistry's domain then.
Largely, yeah, how that condensed energy interacts.
Which leaves I, information. That's blue. And this is about order, pattern.
Exactly. Order, structure, arrangement. Think information science, math, logic, computer code, even genetics. Crucially, information emerges when energy and material are arranged in specific non-random ways.
So a pile of bricks is just E and M, but arrange them into a house, and you've added information.
Perfect analogy. The arrangement is the information. It carries meaning or function because of its structure, like the sequence of letters in a word or the code in DNA.
So this EMI progression, energy first, material emerging from energy, information emerging from the pattern of E and M. Weaver sees this as how complexity actually builds up.
He argues it reflects a fundamental layering in the universe. Stable matter forms, then meaningful patterns and codes arise from how that matter is organized. Its emergence, right at the ground floor.
And how does this EMI thing connect back to flow and systems?
Well, it defines what flows in open systems. Systems exchange energy, material, and information with their surroundings, and it's a prime example of emergence right away, M from E, I from E and M. It sets the stage for all the flows we're going to talk about.
Okay, makes sense. We've got our primary colors, EMI, and our systems thinking glasses on. Let's dive into the river itself, starting at Tier 1, the physical world.
Right, the source of the river. In physics, flow starts super simple. Motion, kinematics, just describing how things move.
For one object, that's just velocity, right? Change in position over time, first base.
First base. But you can get more detailed about the quality of that flow.
Acceleration, how velocity changes.
Yeah, and even jerk how acceleration changes. Is the flow smooth, abrupt? These higher derivatives give you a richer picture.
But usually it's not just one thing moving. It's fluids, waves, lots of stuff interacting. How do you describe that collective flow?
That's where vector fields come in. Imagine mapping out, at every single point in space, both the speed and direction of the flow.
Like for a river, it would show the faster current in the middle, the slower bits near the bank, maybe some swirls.
Exactly, a complete picture of the flow distribution.
And the practical measure, how much is actually crossing a line, so to speak?
That's flux. Flux tells you the intensity, the rate at which something, mass, energy, whatever, is moving across a specific area. How much per second, basically.
Like heat flux through a window or water flow rate in a pipe?
All Tier 1 examples. Heat flux, mass flow, energy flux from the sun. It's the core measurement of physical movement.
So Tier 1 flow is literally the movement of energy and material through space and time. Basic E&M currents.
Governed by predictable laws. Physics, chemistry. Gravity pulls down, heat spreads out. It's reliable, calculable.
And the patterns of these flows, the measurements like flux, the vector fields, that is the information of the physical world.
In this model, yes. The structure of the flow carries the information about the system's state.
And why is starting here so important?
Because this predictable, stable physical flow creates the canvas, as Weaver calls it. It's the reliable foundation. Without these basic, orderly physical laws and flows, Nothing more complex like life could ever emerge or stabilize. It's the bedrock reality.
Okay, the physical bedrock. Then, from these predictable physical currents, we take what Weaver calls a profound emergent leap into Tier 2, life.
Yeah, this is where it gets wild, because life doesn't just let E, M, and I flow according to physics. Life actively harnesses and organizes those flows.
It's like managed flow.
Exactly. Life emerges as this incredibly complex, organized management system for fundamental flows.
And just like EMI, Tier 2 itself has that nested hierarchical structure. Cell, organ, organism.
That's the isomorphic pattern Weaver points out. Complexity building on complexity, managing flow at different scales.
So starting with the cell, a masterpiece of systems design, he calls it.
And it really is seen through that systems lens. First thing, the boundary, the cell membrane.
Right. Defines inside, outside, but it's semi-permeable. It can interact, an open system.
Crucial. It allows controlled exchange. And the cell actively manages the flow across that boundary to maintain its internal state homeostasis.
Bringing in energy like glucose, processing it into ATP.
Yep. Bringing in materials, getting rid of waste, responding to information signals from outside. It's all managed flow.
So the cell is the first place where E, M, and I aren't just flowing passively, but are integrated into a system that maintains itself, replicates itself.
A self-maintaining, self-replicating flow management system. That's the essence of life at its base level. Purposeful, organized flow.
But in complex life, cells don't usually go it alone. They team up. A society of cells, you said.
Yeah, I like that phrase from the source. They communicate.
Through more flows.
You bet. Electrical signal flows in nerves. Chemical signal flows hormones, neurotransmitters, and shared information flow through coordinating DNA.
And this communication and teamwork leads to the organ.
Right. A specialized group of cells working together on a higher level task for the whole organism, like a heart or lungs or liver.
And you said the function of an organ is always about managing some kind of flow.
Seems to be the case. Heart manages blood flow. Lungs manage airflow and gas exchange. Nervous system manages information flow. Digestive system manages nutrient flow. Even the brain manages the flow of thought, complex information processing.
So each organ is like a specialized flow management department within the larger organism company.
Great analogy. Optimized for one crucial flow needed by the whole system.
And finally, all these specialized organs managing their flows and talking to each other integrate into the organism.
The whole shebang, a system of systems. And here, entirely new properties emerge, like a basic form of consciousness.
Not necessarily self-awareness like us, but a unified response. Instincts drive.
Exactly. The organism acts as a coherent whole, reacting to its environment based on integrated information from all its parts. Seeking food, avoiding danger, reproducing.
So information flow is now integrated across the whole organism, guiding its behavior. From a single cell managing basic flows, up through organs managing specific flows, to the whole organism orchestrating all these flows for survival and interaction. Wow.
It's a huge jump in complexity, driven by increasingly sophisticated flow management.
Okay, then the next massive leap. The emergence of the self-aware human from the complex organism. That gets us into Tier 3, the sociocultural world.
Right. Language, abstract thought, culture, values, and maybe most importantly, real choice. This is arguably the most complex layer.
And surprise, surprise, another isomorphic hierarchy here, just like cell organ organism.
Weaver maps it out that way, yeah. One emerging sociocultural flow creates the conditions for the next, more complex one. He calls it a cascade, linking to major areas of human society.
Okay, let's walk through this cascade. 5 levels in Tier 3. What's level 1?
Level 1 is built around science.
Discipline. Science. What does it study, according to this model?
Truth. Specifically verifiable empirical truth. The kind you can test, measure, observe repeatedly. Objective reality.
And the output. What science produces.
Data. The distilled essence of truth, the source calls it. Verified facts.
And when you organize and share that data through language models, you get the flow of information.
Bingo. A shared, stable, predictable understanding of how the world works. This scientific knowledge, this flow, is the bedrock of complex civilization.
It lets us understand cause and effect, build stuff that works, predict things.
Right. It provides that reliable canvas for human systems, just like physical laws did for life in Tier 1. Without it, complex society is just guesswork and wishful thinking.
Makes sense. You need a shared reality first. Okay, so on that informational canvas from science, what's the next layer? Art.
Level 2, art. In this broad sense, art studies membership. how things connect, belong together, form a coherent whole. It looks at relationships between people, ideas, objects, and weaves them into something meaningful.
Okay. And the output of art is beauty, but not just prettiness.
Not just prettiness, no. It's defined systemically as the currency connecting disparate elements into a harmonious whole. It's about successful integration, coherence, that feeling when things just fit together.
Like when a story resonates, or a piece of music unites a crowd, or shared symbols create identity, that feeling of connection.
That's it. That's the beauty here. Coherence, integration. And that generates the flow of love or connection.
Okay, so art creates the flow of connection. Shared identity, belonging, cultural meaning.
Exactly. It lets us form groups based on more than just being near each other. Shared symbols, narratives, identities. It builds the social fabric, the emotional ties, on top of the factual canvas from science. You need the shared facts before you can build shared meaning.
Right. Information first, then connection. What builds on connection? Religion and ethics.
Level 3, religion ethics. These systems study value. They codify what's important to the group, establishing a hierarchy of what matters most, guiding principles. And again, not just traditional religion, could be any core value system: liberty, community, environment.
So they figure out what's important. What's the output?
Judgment. But again, a specific definition, not necessarily pointing fingers, but the organizing principle that establishes a hierarchy. Applying those values to prioritize things, what's good or bad, according to the system's values. What comes first? It's the system's moral compass.
And applying these value judgments creates the flow of hierarchy.
Yes, a shared understanding of what matters, guiding behavior based on those values. And this is critical because it enables large-scale social trust.
Trust between strangers.
Exactly. It allows people who don't know each other to cooperate and interact based on shared rules and expectations defined by these common values.
Yeah.
It builds trust on the foundation of connection. You need that shared we feeling connection before you can establish broad trust based on shared values. Hierarchy.
Information connection. Hierarchy, trust. Okay, what builds on trust? Economics.
Level 4, economics. This studies exchange, and again, broadly defined. Not just money, goods, services, time, skills, ideas, information. Any transfer of value between parts of the system. The intricate dance of value transfer.
And the output of studying exchange.
Markets. The tangible manifestation of exchange. The complex dynamic arenas where exchanges happen, resources get allocated, values are negotiated.
Creating the flow of commerce.
The actual movement of all that stuff, goods, services, capital, ideas, through the system on a large scale. And this flow, only possible because of widespread trust hierarchy, generates massive societal complexity, specialization, wealth, global supply chains.
It builds these really intricate interactions, but only because there's trust underneath.
Exactly. Commerce needs hierarchy.
And all that complex commerce then creates the need for politics.
Level 5, politics.
Yeah.
This studies force, also in a broad sense, influence, authority, power, the dynamics between groups, how are decisions really made, who has power, what forces shape the system. It's like the physics of social systems.
Studying the forces at play, and the output is
Action, collective decisions, laws, policies, programs, treaties. The concrete things that result from the political process designed to steer the system using those forces.
And this leads to the flow of governance.
The overall mechanism for managing conflict, mobilizing resources, setting collective goals, dealing with the outside world. It has to grapple with the immense complexity and competing interests generated by commerce. It manages the dynamics created by all the previous flows. Without governance, complex commerce would likely collapse into chaos.
Wow. So it really is a cascade. Science gives information, art builds connection on that, religion ethics builds hierarchy trust on connection, economics builds commerce on trust, and politics provides governance to manage commerce.
It's presented as a developmental sequence, absolutely. Each level requires the foundation laid by the one before it. You can't have stable, complex commerce without trust. You can't have widespread trust without shared values and connection. You can't build deep connection without some shared understanding of reality. The order matters.
Okay, we've followed the river through physical flows, Tier 1, biological flows, Tier 2, and this cascade of sociocultural flows, Tier 3. Where does that leave us? You mentioned a capstone, philosophy.
Philosophy. It's positioned not just as the next level, but as something different. A transcendental meta-system, Weaver calls it. It sits above the others and has the unique ability to look back and reflect on the whole structure.
So while science studies truth, philosophy studies Wisdom.
Wisdom, yes.
Yeah.
Defined here as a holistic understanding, grasping how all those lower systems, truth, membership connection, value hierarchy, exchange commerce, force governance, interact and fit together. It asks the big cross-cutting questions. What's real? How do we know? What's good? What's beautiful? How should we think?
And if science produces data, philosophy produces
That's
frameworks.
exactly. The big conceptual models, the systems of thought we use to make sense of everything else.
The scientific method itself.
Right.
Or political ideologies, economic theories.
All examples. Even the standard systems model we're using is a philosophical framework. Philosophy provides the blueprints for thought, the structures we use to organize and interpret all those other flows.
Okay, so philosophy provides these meta-level frameworks. How does that lead to the ultimate flow, consciousness?
The flow of consciousness emerges when these philosophical frameworks permeate a system, whether that's one person's mind or a whole society. When a system internalizes these tools for holistic understanding and analysis, it becomes capable of self-reflection.
It stops just running on the lower flows, processing info, connecting, valuing, trading, governing, and starts asking, why?
Precisely. Why these values? Why this economic outcome? What's the purpose of our government? Is there a better way to structure things? This capacity for directed, critical self-reflection, enabled by philosophical frameworks, is the flow of consciousness. It's the system becoming self-aware, reality looking at itself.
And that self-awareness creates a feedback loop back down the chain.
A crucial one. This is the payoff. Consciousness allows the system to intentionally modify itself, to look back at its own structures, its laws, markets, values, even its understanding of science, analyze them using philosophical tools, and decide to change them.
So we can consciously create new laws, new economic models, maybe even new forms of life guided by ethics, new communities based on chosen values.
Exactly. We can use our understanding of all the flows, information, connection, values, exchange, force guided by wisdom and frameworks to try and build better, more resilient, more just, more effective systems. Systems that align better with our consciously chosen concept of good. It connects back to agency, our ability to shape things intentionally.
And Weaver points to the PhD as evidence for this.
Yeah, it's a compelling point. The highest degree in almost any field is Doctor of Philosophy, Physics PhD, History PhD, Economics PhD.
It's not just tradition.
He argues it reflects a deep truth. Real mastery means going beyond just doing the thing. It means grappling with the field's foundations, its assumptions, its limits, its ethics, its place in the bigger picture of knowledge.
You have to become a philosopher of your domain, able to reflect on its structure and purpose, achieve systemic self-awareness in that field.
It's a kind of real-world validation for philosophy, sitting at the top, enabling that ultimate flow of consciousness that integrates everything else.
Okay, let's zoom out and recap the whole journey. We traced this river of reality, started with basic physical flows, E, M, I in Tier 1, motion, vector fields, flux, the stable canvas.
Which made possible the emergence of life in Tier 2 cells, organs, organisms organizing those basic flows in incredibly complex ways to maintain themselves, reproduce, and develop rudimentary consciousness.
Leading to the Tier 3 cascade of sociocultural flows, building human reality. Information from science, connection from art, hierarchy trust from religion values, commerce from economics, and governance from politics, each layer enabling the next.
And finally, crowning it all, philosophy, studying wisdom and producing frameworks, which enables the ultimate immersion flow. Consciousness, the system becoming self-aware, capable of reflecting on itself and intentionally choosing its direction. That's the expression of agency.
And the real value here for us is getting this map, this way of seeing the whole river.
Yeah, it helps you understand not just the surface currents in the systems you're part of, but their deeper sources, how they emerged, how they connect, and maybe most importantly, their potential for conscious, reflective change.
It moves us beyond seeing isolated bits and pieces to seeing the interconnected flows, how complexity builds layer by layer, all the way up to our own capacity to think about it all and maybe do something about it.
From physical stuff flowing predictably, to life organizing flows, to society building complex flows, to consciousness reflecting on those flows. Philosophy, enabling consciousness, gives the system, us, individually or collectively, the power to look back at the river and try to steer it, improve it.
So maybe think about a system you know well, your workplace, your family, your town, maybe just your own habits. How does seeing it through this lens, the information flows, the connections, the values, the exchanges, the power dynamics, change how you understand it?
And if consciousness allows intentional change, how could you use this understanding? Where are the blockages in flow? Where are the leverage points? Could understanding this hierarchy help you contribute to making that system work better according to values you consciously choose? Does seeing reality this way change how you feel about your own ability to make a difference?
Yeah, which systems around you feel like they are benefiting from this kind of conscious philosophical reflection on their own structure? And which ones feel stuck, maybe precisely because they lack that self-awareness?
It's a powerful way to reframe things reality as this dynamic river of flows, with us, through consciousness, having the potential to be thoughtful navigators, not just passive passengers.
Definitely food for thought. How this map of the river might empower us to be more conscious, deliberate shapers of the currents we live in.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive down the river of reality. Hopefully it gives you a new lens to keep observing the flows in the world around you.
And we'll catch you on the next one.